Hi, welcome to the Candice Malcolm Show. I'm your host, Candice Malcolm. It is great to be with you. I hope everyone had a wonderful, wonderful weekend and you're ready to hit the ground running on Monday morning like I am. So usually to prepare for the show, I will go through and read all of the legacy media. I personally like to listen to podcasts. If I'm going for a walk or if I'm getting ready or just, while the kids are getting ready for school, I will throw on a podcast and listen to it. I had never listened to this one before, so I was listening to CTV's National News podcast this morning, and I just need to tell you about it because it was so ridiculous. Like, Canadian media is fake news, and I think this story tells you exactly why. So their top story of the day was obviously Trump, 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 Orange Man bad. And specifically, they were talking about this idea that Trump had said that Canadians would have better healthcare if they became part of America. And then CTV interviewed some people just scoffing at that. Like, how dare he? How dare he say that Canadians would have better healthcare? And then they dwelled on this issue, saying that Trump says that Canada is subsidized by the United States. And again, complaining about that, saying how dare he say that we're not subsidized? And I kid you not, right after that segment ended, they did a teaser for the show, for the news stories that they were also covering. And the two news stories that they were also covering, so again, just started out by complaining about Trump on these two issues: that how dare he say they have better healthcare than us, and how dare they say that we are subsidized by them. Okay, the next two stories that they previewed. The first one is this story about how the U.S. Coast Guard was called in to rescue a Canadian ship on Lake Erie. U.S. Coast Guard. So the U.S. military is working to release a 660-foot Canadian freighter that got trapped in thick ice on Lake Erie over the week. So not like Canada is dependent or subsidized by the American military, except for that is literally happening right now. Canadians can't get out of thick ice on Lake Erie, so they had to call in the Coast Guard, had to get the U.S. military to help us. That was the first story they previewed. The second story that they previewed was about the Saskatchewan nursing shortage, how the province is being hit hard by a total lack of healthcare. And the story was about a rural town in Beauville called Beauville, Saskatchewan, that has been left without any healthcare for 2 weeks due to a shortage of nurses. Sad story, horrible story. But hey, guess what? This is what happens when you have a socialized healthcare system. When your government healthcare system is provided by taxpayers, there will be shortages. There will be rationing of care. That is literally what's happening. The story went on to detail how most nurses don't stay, how it's very hard to retain nurses, how they're very overworked, which is all very true. My mom was a nurse. I get it. Nurses aren't treated very well in our system because of our socialized system and the rationing, and it puts too much pressure on individual nurses. So just way to go, legacy media. Your whole premise that Canadian healthcare is better and that Canada doesn't need the United States was undermined by your own reporting in your own podcast. 2 seconds later, you couldn't make it up. It's better than parody. But that's Canada that we live in. Probably have to listen to a different podcast. Hey, a good time to to promote my own show here. If you're listening on Spotify, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. It really helps out in our rating, helps the discoverability so other people will find the podcast and listen to the show. If you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook, don't forget to like the video, consider sharing it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Okay, so we saw a little preview of President Donald Trump's wrath coming over the weekend. This is an incredible story, really, really incredible. Some people will call it Trump bullying, but to me, it's just incredibly effective leadership. So Trump hits Colombia with a tariff threat. So let me set this up for you. Donald Trump posted this onto his own Truth Social on Sunday evening, and let me pull it open so that I can just read it to you. He explains exactly what happens. He says, I was just informed that 2 repatriation flights from the United States with a large number of illegal criminals were not allowed to land in Colombia. This order was given by Colombia's socialist president, Gustavo Petro, who is already very unpopular amongst his people. Petro's denial of these flights has jeopardized the national security and public safety of the United States. So I have directed my administration to immediately take the following urgent and decisive retaliatory measures. So first, a 25% tariff on all goods coming into the United States. Next, he has in 1 week, the tariff goes up another 25% up to 50%. Oh my goodness, makes it much, much worse here. He says He will implement a travel ban and immediate visa revocation on Colombian government officials and allies and supporters. Next, he says visa sanctions on all party members, family members, and supporters of the Colombian government. He goes on basically to say that they won't be allowed to do their financial institutions will be frozen. He says these measures are just the beginning. We will not allow the Colombian government to violate its legal obligation with regard to the acceptance and return of the criminals they forced into the United States. Wow. That really hits them where they hurt. It's brutal enough to implement a trade tariff like that. Colombia's number one trading partner is the United States. 25% now, another 25%. Obviously, that would bankrupt the country, bankrupt like every business that was going in Colombia. But the travel bans were the hilarious part, because that this is always how it happens in these corrupt countries, where government officials and their families are actually living large in like Miami or New York City or Los Angeles, while they don't have to live through the horrible repercussions of their socialist governments down in whatever country they're in. And so they all live in the US. So by him saying an immediate travel ban and visa revocation for all of your family, for all the government officials and all of their family members, like get out, you know that they got a lot of very, very angry phone calls on that one. Look, I just think this is effective. Readers and viewers know, but prior to me starting True North, I worked in the Canadian government. I was the press secretary to the Minister of Immigration. And this is a very real issue. This is real. So what happens is you have a very bad person in your country and you want to deport them. You want to deport this very bad person back to the terrible country that they came from. And they've come to our country, sometimes illegally, sometimes legally, broken a bunch of laws. They are now eligible for deportation. You want them to go. But the problem is that they don't have any documents, right? When they came to the country, usually when they pretend to be refugees and make asylum claims, they will leave their passport, throw it in the garbage, flush it down the toilet, light it on fire. They want to get rid of their previous documents because they don't want to be sent home. And so it's a legitimate problem. You have a very bad person in your country and you want to deport them, and you actually have no way to send them home unless the government cooperates and issues them a new passport. So in this case, if you had a very bad person from Colombia and you want to deport them to Colombia, the Colombian government would have to cooperate, issue them new passports so that they can actually get into the country. Canada deals with this all the time. Like I said, I was press secretary for the Minister of Immigration all the way back 2011, 2012. This is a very real problem. Canada deals with it too. But we don't have this, we don't have a bombastic leader, someone who is willing to just go absolutely all out in order to make sure that these bad people can leave the country. And so Trump is doing something I think very good. I think that Canada should do this kind of thing. I think Canada should work with Trump in, hey, at the same time, why don't you take your very bad people back from Canada as well? So Trump's threats, absolutely devastating. And initially, Colombian government, Gustavo Petro, initially responded by saying no. So he posted this: the United States cannot treat Colombian migrants as criminals. I deny the entry of the American planes carrying Colombian migrants into our country. The United States must establish a protocol for dignified treatment of migrants before we can receive them. So that's what he said. That's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it because, again, the foreign leaders are used to getting to do this way, getting their own way, just saying, no, we want better treatment. We're not going to take them back. We're not going to cooperate, because there hasn't been a leader in a country like Donald Trump. There hasn't been a leader in a country like Canada or the United States that is willing to just say, absolutely not. We actually have a lot of power over you. We have a lot of things that we do for you that we don't have to do. We're doing it out of the goodness of our heart, or we're doing this for you, and we don't have to do it for you. And this is what's going to happen. These are the consequences. Of course, I don't always mean to pick on Andrew Coyne. It just so happens that he usually says the stupidest thing in the news stories that I want to talk about. So Andrew Coyne immediately goes to celebrate Colombia. This is just hilarious. So this is, this is what he writes. Good for Colombia. The key is for all democratic countries to resist Trump's bullying together, just as all of the democratic forces inside the U.S. need to. So basically, he wants Canada on the side of the Colombian criminals and socialists. Good call there, Andrew Coyne. Yeah, Canada should stand with Colombia in this. Literally, we deal with the same problem. We have the same issue trying to deport people who won't let us. So Andrew Coyne is cheering on the socialists in Colombia in their defiance, except for like 2 minutes later, they caved. So you might want to delete that tweet, Andrew Coyne. So following Trump's tariff threat, the Colombian government did a very quick about face. They did not want their visas to be revoked. They did not want their family members to be kicked out of Miami or New York or wherever they might be living. And basically just said, not only will we take these criminals back, but we will send our own presidential airplane to pick them up. So, yes, that is very effective. That is very comical. That is how you get things done, my friends. That is how you get things done. You put your money where your mouth is. You put it all on the line. You say, look, this is how it's going to be from now on. And if you don't cooperate, there will be consequences, not just for your country, but for you personally and your corrupt regime. And that was very exposed. So, yes, I have to say I'm worked up about this. I think Canada should do the same thing. We might not have the same ability to promote change like that around the world. Like we don't have as much at stake with people, having visas to be able to come to Canada or with our trade. But again, we should be partnering with the United States to say, hey, let's secure all of North America. Let's get all of our criminals out. Help us deport these people, and we'll work with you in the future. I think Canada should be striking a deal like that. Okay, Trump ups his rhetoric against Canada, so we'll get into this little tit for tat that's happening between Trump and possibly Pierre Poilievre. So on Friday, Donald Trump told reporters that he would still love to see Canada as a 51st state, adding that Canadian citizens, if it happened, would get a very big tax cut. And I think this is a clip where he also said that Canadians would get better healthcare. Let's play that clip.
I would love to see Canada be the 51st state. The Canadian citizens, if that happened, would get a very big tax cut, tremendous tax cut, because they're very highly taxed. And you wouldn't have to worry about military. You wouldn't have to worry about many of the things. You'd have better health coverage. You'd have much better health coverage. So I think the people of Canada would like it, if it's explained.
Fact check true. Yes, we would have lower taxes and better healthcare if we join America. Now, that might be controversial to say that we'd have better healthcare because, yes, there are people in the United States who go bankrupt because they can't afford their medical bills. I'm not saying that the American healthcare system is perfect. I have a lot of criticisms about the way that insurance is issued. The reality is that anybody who is in the bottom, like 50% of the country, gets government healthcare insurance, gets government insurance in the United States. All people who have a job and are employed also have healthcare through their provider. I personally have an anecdote. I have had healthcare in both Canada and the United States. I've been pregnant in both countries and seen care, and it is bar none head and shoulders better in the United States. I was in California, so granted, I was in a affluent part of the state, and we were on my husband's work health insurance, so we had very, very good health insurance. My experience in the United States were always very, very positive. I was pregnant during COVID, and I was in Toronto, and let me just tell you, I felt like I was in a refugee camp. Going to the OB, going to the doctor during pregnancy in Canada was not a good experience. Wouldn't recommend it. I know that everyone has their own experiences, but my experiences in Canada, from everything like my husband needed stitches last year and he had to sit in the emergency room in Toronto for like 12 hours watching people get stabbed, watching drug addicts all around. Everyone has these kind of stories. But yeah, healthcare in Canada isn't that great. It is a problem. Trump kind of poked the bear with that one, making hitting Canadians where it hurts, because we love to pretend that we have superior healthcare, even though I think deep down we all know that we don't. And COVID really exposed that. Also, of course, Canadians would get a very big tax cut because we showed this before, but I think it was a Fraser Institute did a study of the tax rates per jurisdiction in North America, and the 10 Canadian provinces were like the top 10 jurisdictions for highly taxed. Even low tax Alberta is higher tax than the highest tax states like California and New York. So yes, we would have a tax cut. Now, Pierre Poilievre stepping up, we hadn't really heard in detail what his position is when it comes to Trump, dealing with Trump and the potential trade war. Basically, we have, the whole spectrum. Justin Trudeau over here saying nothing's off the table. We'll do anything, including possibly and potentially an embargo on oil. And then on the other hand, you have Danielle Smith saying, not going to happen, not a good idea. Let's not hurt ourselves even further. Let's not engage in a trade war. I think that Pierre Poilievre kind of strikes a nice balance here, comes out sort of in the middle, not really advocating for a trade war, but saying that, if push comes to shove, that's where he would go. So let's watch this clip.
Look, President Trump is a deal maker. He wants to win, but we're both going to lose as Americans and Canadians if we get into a trade war. So what I would say is, how do we position the decision for him so that he understands that America can only win if it allows open, unbridled free trade with Canada? So I would retaliate, and I would target products and services that, A, we don't need, B, we can make ourselves, and C, that we can buy elsewhere, so that we maximize impact on the Americans while minimizing impact on Canadians. Secondly, I would pass an emergency, bring it home tax cut on work, investment, making stuff in Canada, energy, home building, so that we can stimulate more economic growth here. Three, we need to become more self-sufficient. That means knocking down barriers, more interprovincial free trade. We have freer trade with the Americans today than we do with ourselves. We have to knock down those barriers, build pipelines, LNG liquefaction facilities to sell our stuff to the world without having to go through the Americans. If they're going to be an unreliable trade partner, we've got to find ways to sell more to ourselves and more to the rest of the world.
Do you see it as a dollar-for-dollar retaliation?
I would say so, yeah. It has to hit hard. And again, we have to be very pinpoint and surgical to make sure we're maximizing impact on the American side while minimizing impact on our side.
So Pierre making it clear, I know a lot of Conservatives who are celebrating that clip. I don't see it quite that way. I don't think it's in Canada's interest at all to go down this path of a trade war. I don't think, even I get that his point is that you want precision and that you got to hit them where it hurts. It's not going to hurt them nearly as much as it's going to hurt us. We're not in a position economically to be strong enough to withstand that, not to mention the fact that we desperately need the Americans, as is evident by our ship that is trapped in Lake Erie in the ice, and immediately the Americans come in, out of the goodness of their heart. They could have said no, but they wouldn't. They wouldn't leave 17 people stranded on a ship. That's how many people were on that boat that I showed you earlier in Lake Erie. They're going to come in and they're going to rescue those Canadians. And the fact that that's hardly in the news. That story is hardly even out there. This fact that the Americans are coming in, rescuing Canadian workers, rescuing our ship that is trapped in the ice at Lake Erie. We should be thanking the Americans. We should be friends with them. We should be promoting the friendship. I think Pierre should go down and talk to Trump one-on-one and make a deal. But that kind of talk, I guess that's what it takes to win an election, or to just be seen as moderate in Canada these days. But I would like to see Canada get on board with working with Trump, making a deal. He's our ally. He's our friend. Their boats are rescuing our boats as we speak. So let's not jeopardize that relationship. All that's to say that those tariffs look to be coming in on February 1st. So we will be reporting on that later this week as it happens. And again, hopefully it doesn't. Trump said day one didn't happen. I think there's still room for negotiation. I think that there's still room for Trump to change his mind. There's a lot going on in the world, a lot going on Trump's agenda. So hopefully it isn't a top priority. We do have one Canadian politician who's sort of using Trump to his advantage. We heard that Ontario Premier Doug Ford will call an election this week. So Premier Doug Ford confirms that he will call a snap election on February 27th. He's to make that announcement later this week. Of course, there isn't supposed to be an election until 2026. Of course, the last election was in 2022. Ford got a majority then. He got his first majority back in 2008. So this is his second straight majority. It's supposed to be a 4-year term, but this is what Canadian politicians do. They read the polls, they look for an opportunity, and they would rather, Doug Ford thinks that he can run an election against Donald Trump. Somehow the provincial government needs a mandate to deal with Trump. I don't quite understand that one, but I think Ford is just using this to his advantage. His PCs are riding very high in the polls. Latest polls show him at 46 or 47%, potentially winning 108 out of the 122 seats in the Ontario provincial parliament there. So, and of course the Liberals are still in shambles provincially. I think that Doug Ford is kind of doing it a favor to Justin Trudeau and the Liberals right now. Really, the reality is that we need a federal election. We need a federal election so that someone with a clear mandate can go in and negotiate with and talk with Donald Trump. we need the Liberals out. Justin Trudeau resigned, or said that he was intending to resign, and then he didn't actually resign. He said that they were going to have a leadership race instead, and now we're waiting for that. That's not right. That's not right. Canadians deserve an election now. I started a petition on my website. You should go check that out at CandiceMalcolm.com. Sign my petition urging for an election. Once we get enough signatures, we're going to take it to the Governor General and Canadians demand an election, because we need a federal party to deal with Trump. Provincial party, now that there's an election that's happening in February, there's no way that they're going to call a national election, because Ontarians can't go to the polls simultaneously at the same time, or at least that'll be the argument. So thanks, Doug Ford. Because of you, it seems like we are going to have to wait a little bit longer to replace the Liberal Party and get a new federal government. And again, this is what politicians do, right? This is what Justin Trudeau did. Justin Trudeau really wanted a post-COVID referendum on his leadership, because the worst had still yet to come. So that's why he prompted that 2021 campaign, after saying that he thought that it would be reckless to campaign in the midst of a pandemic. He himself triggered an election because he saw that he was higher in the polls than the Conservatives at the time and leader Erin O'Toole. So he pushed that, knowing full well, if you look at Trudeau's trajectory, if he had not had that election in 2021, if it had even gone another 6 months until the spring of 2022, I think Justin Trudeau would have lost handily. Keep in mind, the trucker convoy happened in January of 2022. That is when people really, really got fed up with the COVID nonsense, with the mandates, with the government control, everything about it. It was just like, absolutely enough is enough. Another year where kids weren't properly in school, where they were forcing us to wear masks, where they were pushing all kinds of insane edicts that made no sense, not to mention the wrath of the vaxxers, like absolute madness. And it would have fallen apart for Trudeau. So it was quite smart from a political perspective for him to push election 2021. Not that I was happy with the outcome. I thought it was terrible, but this is what politicians in Canada can do. They can get away with this kind of stuff because we let them. Well, this is kind of a funny story. So, Doug Ford famously put on a hat saying Canada is not for sale, kind of showing the other side of, it looked like a Trump hat. It looked like a Make America Great Again hat. Do we have a picture of it there, Sean? Yeah, so there's his hat. Canada's not for sale. Well, a funny story that those hats, of course, are not being made in Canada. Canada's not for sale. So let's manufacture our hats in some sweatshop in Vietnam, Bangladesh, or China. Apparently, you can't really have hats made in Canada these days. There's not a lot of people making hats. And the whole idea. Well, basically, those hats are selling out. They're selling like hotcakes because Canadians love the idea of standing up and being tough. But the idea is that we can't even make these hats in our own country. It's kind of sad, kind of pathetic. So, Doug Ford's going to have an election. We will cover it for you here on the show. And don't forget to check out True North, tnc.news. Sign up for the newsletter over there. They will be covering this election very closely and giving you all the latest. Okay, let's move on to, I want to talk to you about the Liberal leadership race, the latest of that. Before I do, I'll show you one more Poilievre clip. Is this a clip or is this this is a clip. So Conservative Leader Pierre Poilievre called on Mark Carney, this is good, to ban Trudeau cabinet ministers from cabinet. So we all know that Mark Carney is pretending to be an outsider. He's pretending that he was totally, totally different and not involved at all in Justin Trudeau's horrible time as prime minister. It's a bit unfortunate because there's news reports dating back to 2020 talking about how Mark Carney was an advisor to Justin Trudeau. There was always rumors that he was going to swoop in at any point and become the finance minister. And not exactly an outsider, but nonetheless, Mark Carney is running as an outsider. So Pierre Poilievre basically said, again, put your money where your mouth is. Published an open letter to Mark Carney calling on him to ban any Trudeau minister from serving in cabinet. And he was asked about this while campaigning with François-Philippe Champagne on Sunday. Carney responded to Poilievre, saying that he has no respect for half the country. Let's play this clip.
Monsieur Poilievre, he wants to control everything. He wants to insult half the country. He doesn't have respect for the deputies. He doesn't have respect for the people. And the Canadians will have a real option in the next election. I think he's scared is the first thing. Why is he writing me a letter on a Sunday morning?
I don't think that Pierre Poilievre is scared, but that's the line. It would be interesting. I think that that's a good point. I think that if Mark Carney truly was an outsider and truly recognized the scope of the disaster that was the Justin Trudeau government, he should commit to having a new cabinet altogether. And so, of course, interestingly, while Carney tries to run far away from Justin Trudeau and his record, Trudeau's cabinet ministers are now consolidating their support around Mark Carney. So on Saturday, we had Transportation Minister Anita Anand release a video endorsing Mark Carney, saying Mark has the ability to steer Canada during very difficult times. Let's play that clip.
Over the past weeks, I've taken time to think about what is best for our country, our party, and our beautiful town of Oakville. I've spoken with Liberals, including the amazing supporters with me today, to discuss what is best at this time in Canada's history. And we agree that Mark Carney is the leader that Canada needs. I worked with Mark during the global financial crisis almost 20 years ago, and I saw at that time that Mark has the ability to steer Canada during very difficult times and to ensure that Canada comes out on top.
Okay, brutal video. Interestingly, again, more and more of these cabinet ministers are coming and endorsing and supporting Mark Carney. So I think we have a CBC tracker, don't we, Sean? It shows how many MPs are supporting each leadership hopeful. So Mark Carney is way up ahead in that count, with 52 caucus members and Liberals supporting him, whereas Chrystia Freeland only has 26. Katrina Gold only has 2. Not exactly an endorsement for Chrystia Freeland. It's pretty wild, right? It's like Mark Carney's a so-called outsider. Chrystia Freeland's been part of the team day in, day out. The fact that she can't even get her own colleagues to support her is pretty damning in my mind. You would think, she was the deputy prime minister. She was the finance minister. She took the principled stand to leave caucus before Justin Trudeau tried to fire her and boot her out, as she claims. So the fact that so many of the Liberal MPs are going with Mark Carney, I think that tells you a lot about Chrystia Freeland. The fact that her own colleagues don't respect her, don't like her, don't want to lead the party. Maybe it's strategic. Maybe it's because they think that she's too close to Trudeau and that she, that the Canadian public would reject her as leader because she'll just be seen as like, a part of the Trudeau government. But really, she's been there. She's had a long time to work on those friendships and those relationships. So the fact, again, that 52 are with Carney and only 26 with Freeland, ouch. I've heard a theory that a lot of the MPs are kind of ticked with Chrystia Freeland right now, possibly saying that, if it weren't for her leaving cabinet, stepping down as finance minister, that this chain of events wouldn't have happened. Trudeau wouldn't have resigned. He wouldn't have stepped down. He would still be prime minister. They would still be able to sort of hobble along until the October election. Justin Trudeau is a known quantity when it comes to the election. He's a good campaigner. There's not very much that I will say good about Justin Trudeau. I won't compliment him at all. I think he's a terrible prime minister, terrible leader, terrible on policy, terrible speaker, everything. Objectively, though, he's run 3 campaigns in a row, and that is seen as his strong point. His strongest skill is campaigning, whereas Carney, Freeland, whoever the next Liberal leader will be, they've never campaigned nationally. They've never led a party before, so odds are they won't do very well. Odds are Canadians won't be happy. So it's possible that MPs are still a little grouchy at Freeland, a little bit bitter that this all happened and blaming her for that. The reality is that the Liberals are not going to win. Whenever there is election, if there's an election in the future, hopefully sooner rather than later, the Liberals aren't going to win. Canadians are going to send them a big message telling them just how displeased we are with their record and their time in office. It doesn't really matter if it'll be Carney or Freeland, but my money right now is certainly on Mark Carney. Also over the weekend, we had Defense Minister Bill Blair and the newly appointed housing minister, Nate Erxal-Smith also endorsed Mark Carney. So we'll get into this story a little bit. Mark Carney and Nate Erxal-Smith were doing a event together in the Beaches, a nice little neighborhood over in East Toronto. And basically, I mean, this is a little wild. So I'll play this clip. Melissa Lantsman, who is a Conservative MP, and I think she's a deputy leader of the party, she interrupted this event that was happening nearby with Mark Carney and Nate Smith. So she was interrupting him, and then she was speaking to reporters, and he came up and he interrupted her, and they got into a little bit of dispute. I know a lot of people were really, really outraged about this happening online. A lot of conservatives were very, very upset that this male MP put his hand on the female MP's shoulders. I'll play the clip. You can draw your own conclusions. Let's play that clip now.
Welcome to the Beaches, East York.
Thank you. I want to know what you promised Mark Carney.
I'm going to buy you a drink.
Perfect. We want to know what Mark Carney promised Mr. Erskine-Smith.
So yeah, so you can see there that they were kind of joking around. He was saying, "I want to buy you a drink. Let's talk." She was kind of trying to push him away so she can continue to give her speech to the press. And then he kind of comes back in and he touches her shoulder. And so the Conservatives screenshotted that picture of him touching her shoulder and tried to make a big deal about it. You saw a lot of Conservative commentators on social media saying, get your hands off her, never touch her, how dare you, blah, 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 blah. The reality is that she was kind of crashing his event and he was kind of trying to crash hers, and it looked like it was all in fun. I'm not one of those people who are going to make a big deal like, how dare you? It's politics, they're campaigning, it's all about showmanship. They were each trying to updo each other. I don't know, maybe I'm missing something. Let me know in the comments if there's something that is deeply wrong here that I'm missing, but I just can't make myself get worked up over something like that. Okay, let's get back to the Liberal leadership race. So Ruby Dalla, his campaigning, she released a clip with an interview of herself. This is a former Brampton MP who's now running for Liberal leadership, or she's a hopeful for that race. Ruby Dalla jumping out and saying, let's deport, calling on deporting illegals out of Canada. Let's play that clip.
Well, they want, it's a very good question, but they want to send back people that have just jumped the border illegally. And I also actually agree with that approach. If you've come to Canada illegally, by illegal means, then you need to be deported out of the country. I think that, when it comes to any type of crime, and that is criminal because you're coming here illegally, if you come illegally into this country, you need to be deported. And as soon as you start laying down the gamut, and as soon as you start becoming very strict on these immigration policies, I think that you're naturally going to have a reduction.
Okay, let's just all pause for a moment and appreciate this moment, okay? As someone who has been talking about immigration publicly for at least a decade, somebody who has often said just that, if you come to our country illegally, you have to be deported. We are a country that respects the rule of law. We are a country based on order and law. If you come here illegally, you cannot stay, you have to go. It used to be considered really offside for someone to say that. I have been accused of all kinds of things, ranging from xenophobic to racist to anything else, just for stating this fact that if you come to our country illegally, you have to go. So I just want to stop and pause and say this is a breath of fresh air. I'm not going to vote in the Liberal leadership race. I'm not a Liberal. I would never support someone like Ruby Dalla to lead the country. However, the fact that a Liberal is saying this shows us just how far we've shifted the Overton window in this country, just how much things have changed. It used to be considered edgy or offside to say something like this, and now it is mainstream. Everybody agrees. The Liberals have broken our immigration system. They've broken the consensus, and enough is enough. So I welcome this. I think it's great. I think that the Liberal Party should be more right-wing. I think that they should be more anti-immigration, more anti-illegal immigration, because it would push the federal Conservative Party, again, to be better on immigration. The more kind of hawkish you have a Liberal Party on this issue, it gives Conservatives, they have to break away and do something different. So it would make the Conservatives be stronger as well. Do I think Ruby Della is going to win? No, probably not. I don't think she has a great chance of winning, but I like hearing this. It's the same as, if Christy Clark were going to be leader. Like, look, I don't support Christy Clark. I don't much like her. I don't want the idea of a carbon tax coming in, and that was sort of her marquee platform, marquee program and policy from when she was the Liberal premier of British Columbia. But she's certainly more conservative than the rest of the Liberal Party. And so having a Liberal leader that's a bit more conservative is a good thing. If they can run down the center or even center right, it would force the Conservatives to stake out more positions on the right, better positions when it comes to our economy, lower taxes, freer trade, less immigration, all this kind of stuff, cracking down on crime. If we have a more centrist Liberal Party, that's better for everybody. And again, if there's any silver lining from this whole Justin Trudeau prime ministership and him blowing up his party, is that maybe hopefully the party will move more back to the center or even a little bit to the right. Okay, there was a little bit of another update on this Liberal leadership race. This is that MP Chanda Ara has been disqualified from the leadership race. So on Sunday, Liberal leadership hopeful announced that he had been informed by the party of his disqualification from the race, adding that the decision raises significant questions about the legitimacy of the leadership race and, by extension, the legitimacy of the next Prime Minister of Canada. Well, he's right about that. I don't think that the next Prime Minister of Canada will have a lot of legitimacy, given that they're not being selected in a federal election. They're just being chosen by their own party in a system that's not very transparent or secure. Certainly, that is right. If Justin Trudeau had any honor, he would just call an election. He would lead the party into the election, allow Canadians a choice as to who will be the next prime minister. But because he's not, because he cares much more about his own legacy and his political party, he is not allowing that. He probed Parliament so that they can have this Liberal leadership race. The next prime minister will not have any legitimacy. So he's right about that. I don't know if it will make it any worse that he has been disqualified. I don't know that Canadians will know or care. According to Arya, he said that he met the deadline to submit his nomination his nomination papers. He previously announced that he had submitted the application package to the Liberal Party of Canada. That was on January 21st. He also said he submitted the $50,000 compliance deposit to the leadership contest. He received over 1,000 endorsements nationwide and more than 200 endorsements from each of the 3 provinces, meeting or exceeding all of the requirements for leader. So why was he kicked out? Why do you think that he was kicked out of the party? Lots of theories as to why. One of the things that was floating around, the Liberal Party's national leadership rules allow party officials to vet potential candidates to deem whether they have been whether they have satisfied mandatory criteria, and if they are manifestly unfit for the office of the Liberal Party of Canada, they can be kicked out. So maybe it was party brass just saying, look, we really don't want this guy. I point this out that he did this CBC interview. He did an interview with Power and Politics host David Cochrane, where not only did he admit that he had lied when he said that he knew how to speak French. On his parliamentary website, it says preferred languages are English and French. Well, in this interview, he first admitted that he does not know how to speak French, so he lied. And then he went on to say that French isn't very important. French, who cares? Who cares about French? He says in the Liberal Party that Quebecers are really just English Canadians. I think we have that clip. Let's play that clip.
How's your French?
Nope.
No French?
No French.
Okay, the Liberal Party of Canada is the party of official bilingualism. It's going to be a tough one. I don't speak French either, so
The point is that whether the Quebecers are English Canadians, it's not the language that matters, it's what is that they deliver to them.
But the language matters very much in Quebec.
No. At the end of the day, Quebecers see who delivers what. We have English-speaking, French-fluent prime minister for all the time. One of the things that matters to Quebecers are being a sovereign country, a sovereign republic.
Yeah.
And which prime minister has ever talked about that?
Mr. Arya, if you're going to run for prime minister, you have to know that the French language matters, and the French it matters in Quebec.
Trust me.
Profoundly.
Trust me. At the end of the day, for French Canadians and English Canadians, the matters most is that how the children and grandchildren are going to prosper in this country. That is the thing that matters.
no, language doesn't really matter. You're wrong, CBC. You're wrong, Liberal Party. Quebecers don't care. Of course, I don't think it matters. I think that if you were the leader of the Conservative Party and you didn't speak French, it would be perfectly fine. The Liberal Party requires so much support from Quebec in order to govern. Like, they cannot govern without getting almost universal support out of Quebec. So this guy was just wrong. My guess is that was the reason that got him kicked out. Although there are other theories circulating online, some of them very, very fun. So, there was a campaign. I don't know if it was serious or if it was just sort of being funny, but many conservatives or conservative-minded Canadians were talking about how it would be great if they joined the Liberal Party. So, just a second, Sean, don't get too far ahead of me here. That it would be great if Conservatives would just take out a Liberal Party membership. It is free. Anyone can do it online. It doesn't cost any money. All you have to do is just fill out a form. Anyone can do it. So urging conservative-minded Canadians to take out a party membership just so that they can go online and vote for this person who would clearly be a terrible candidate federally, who would decimate the Liberal Party. My opinion, the Liberal Party is going to get decimated anyway, so you don't need to put up a terrible candidate. Even if you put up the best candidate possible, which I think probably they believe is Mark Carney, your party will still get decimated. But this is kind of like the meme taking over real life, saying let's make a mockery of our political system and the Liberal Party. So you had Rick Hillier, who is a conservative minded person, and he writes, we need about 250,000 people to join the Liberal Party and vote for Chanda Arya as leader. Check out the number and the reach on that tweet. 900,000 views on that one. So, tons of people saying, yes, everybody, take out a membership, vote this guy in. Possibly, maybe that was why the Liberals said, look, this guy has to go, because they were afraid that he might actually win. That because of the absolute joke that is their leadership process, their whole leadership system, that anyone can join and that it doesn't cost any money. So you don't even know who the people are. I've heard reports and stories of people's dogs getting registered as Liberal Party. We had a True North supporter who wrote in saying that he started getting emails saying that he had registered for the Liberal Party leadership race, even though he's not a Liberal and he never did. Someone just threw his name and email address in. It's super easy. Anyone can do it. I think that points to what a joke this party is, that they can't even secure their own leadership race, and this idea that anyone can vote rather than this individual. But if I were running the Liberal Party and I saw that tweet and I saw a lot of people signing up and a lot of signs pointing to the fact that this guy might be leader, it might not be a bad idea to disqualify him. It's not like the Liberals really care about democracy. We know that. There's also some rumors circulating online that perhaps it was connected to foreign interference. Perhaps this person has a past. There is that report coming out of the MPs who, are suspected of being involved in foreign interference that are being funded by foreign governments. So some speculation that this individual might be connected to Modi in India. Just pure speculation, not making any accusations there, but lots and lots of reasons why this individual might have been removed. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think that the Liberals just dodged a bullet there? And would you have liked to see Arya perhaps potentially as the leader of the Liberal Party? Okay, well, I want to switch focus here and talk a little bit about the NDP. The NDP is a party that's in a total mess. I just talked about the mess that is the Conservative Party, but the NDP party are also in a mess. I was really pleased to catch up with an individual named Julian Newman last week, and I'm going to play you that interview. So before I do, I'll just explain a little bit about it. So Julian is a spokesperson for a group that's organizing a petition to have Jagmeet Singh basically, they wrote an open letter to Jagmeet Singh, basically just saying that the Liberal government's one of the worst governments in Liberal history. Canada's facing a dire potential trade war with the United States. The Liberal Party is in disarray, and asking that he withdraw his support from the Liberal Party, forcing an election as fast as possible. And so Julian is a spokesperson for that group. He was previously the NDP's head organizer under Tom Mulcair. He was head of Quebec operations under Jack Layton, and you'll hear he tells personal anecdote about his time working with Jack Layton and how far the party has fallen since those days. He's currently instructing a philosophy course at Princeton University. It was really a pleasure to catch up with Julian. So here is that interview. Hi, Julian. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us about this letter that you've put forth and what it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah, so we came together, a group of 35 senior former NDP staffers and former NDP members of parliament. And it's important to stress the former because Jagmeet has threatened to sue me personally. So that's important. But yeah, so we were 35 folks. We started a conversation with the New Democratic Party's leadership in December. We were trying to tell them, like, hey, there's an upcoming trade war and Canada needs a government. Obviously, they didn't listen. So we started a petition and got 1,000 NDP members and NDP voters to sign that petition over a few days, over the holidays. And our goal is to say, like, hey, Jagmeet, you are not taking this seriously. And it's important that we trigger an election as quickly as possible, pretty much to avoid the situation that ended up happening.
Well, it's frustrating from my perspective and maybe more from the Conservative perspective that a small party with not that many seats relative to the other parties has this balance of power. One person, Jagmeet Singh, has extraordinary power and has been propping up a terrible government that, again, in my opinion, should have been toppled years ago, at least 1, maybe 2 years ago. And so it's interesting to see that even NDP members and sort of people who used to hold positions of power in that party feel the same way. So do you think that this is a sentiment that's broadly felt across the sort of base of the NDP party? Do you think that this is more something that's bothering people at the top? Maybe describe your interactions with other members of your party and how people are viewing this.
Yeah, my strong belief is that this is how the vast majority of NDP voters, the vast majority of NDP members, pretty much everybody outside of the Ottawa club feels. It took us 4 days to get 1,000 people to sign our petition. And we'd always hear people saying, like, "Hey, it's great that you're that you're doing this." So my strong impression is, at least in the NDP circles, people agree with you.
Well, I mean, it just seems so obvious. It's like, Trump is coming in with a mandate from the people to be tough on this kind of thing. And so, that he's in firm positions with his, with his country and what he's doing, whereas Canada doesn't really have a government. I mean, things have just gotten worse since Justin Trudeau has resigned, because rather than trigger an election and letting Canadians decide who our next prime minister will be, it's now the Liberal insiders that get to choose who the next prime minister will be, who will be at the table across from Donald Trump negotiating this. So how was your petition and your letter met? You mentioned there that Jagmeet Singh is now suing you. So why don't you walk us through what happened after you submitted your petition to the party?
Yeah, they're very unreceptive. Their perspective is, or at least what they stated is, we need to stop Poilievre. That's kind of how they think about it. How we think about it is, what is the best thing for Canadians? What is the best thing for working class Canadians? I think that's probably how you think about it. That's how most Canadians would think about it. That's not how they think about it. They think about, how are we going to stop the Conservatives? And a really good example of how they reacted is that they sent me threatening legal letters personally afterwards.
Well, if you're anything like me, that would just motivate me even more to raise these kinds of issues. So if Jagmeet Singh is not willing to listen to members of his own party and do what's best for Canadians, I mean, it's kind of wild at this point that he thinks Poilievre is the biggest threat to the country, given that what Justin Trudeau has put us through for the last 9 years, and specifically for the last 2 or 3 years with the economy. At what point will your party just oust this leader and say, listen, if you're not going to look out for the best interests of the Canadian people and the members of the NDP, you can't lead this party anymore?
There was a lot of pushback on Jagmeet around the what they call it, the new thing that they call the War Measures Act, the Emergencies Act. There's a tremendous amount of pushback internally, not publicly at the time. And nobody came out publicly for a variety of reasons. Part of it, presumably, is that these guys are super hostile and they'll threaten to sue you if you speak out against them. And it's it does, like, I think one of the things that you could see as a non-New Democrat is that people have been upset for a long time over how Jagmeet is essentially not a New Democrat, right? He's the supposed leader of the party, but is he left-wing? How is he left-wing? How is he a New Democrat? Like, how the NDP is the only party that opposed the War Measures Act against in the elder, and for some reason they supported this using the same extrajudicial powers against protesters. That was really odd. That was very non-NDP. Nobody spoke out publicly that I know of. Again, they're doing something completely insane, in my opinion, right now. And the difference is that folks are speaking out. Right now, it's just me. We have other issues, and soon we're going to start having more senior people from the party coming out and speaking up.
Well, I'm glad you noticed it too, because from my perspective, it's like, in what world is an NDP leader the one that's just so, interested in power and self-preservation that they're willing to put up with like unbelievable civil liberties assaults? It seems like the party really has shifted sort of to the cosmopolitan center rather than representing the sort of blue collar concerns, working class concerns that the party traditionally aligned with. Look, I mean, I won't complain because it's probably good for the conservatives since many of those voters are heading on over to the political right. We saw this with Donald Trump as well. But it seems to me that this is a historic opportunity for New Democrats because the liberals have just been so god awful. Like, they've put the country through such hell over the last 9 years that I imagine that the party will get decimated in the next election. I imagine that Canadians will want to send a message of fury to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, something that the Liberals have not seen. Like, I could imagine the party getting wiped out similarly to the way that the Progressive Conservatives got wiped out in 1993. The only problem is that the alternative is sort of part of the same bandit, right? Like Jagmeet Singh has propped up the government for the last several years, 2 minority situations in a row. And so it's like, well, who are we going to send a message to? There isn't a great alternative, whereas the NDP, with a different leader and with a different message, could be poised to do what they did back in 2011 with, I think, the leader that you worked with, Jack Layton, where he really capture the imagination, especially in Quebec. And we saw that big orange wave. It's too bad that the NDP isn't better positioned. Hopefully you can help fix that party and create a better alternative. What do you think of all of that?
I 100% agree with what you're saying. I'll give you a story that kind of like illustrates your point. When I worked for Jack, I would constantly try to get him to wear nicer ties. And he would refuse to wear nicer ties. He was like a really working class guy. Eventually I convinced him to wear nicer ties by just giving him all of my ties. And in the 2011 campaign, he campaigned with my ties. And I actually lost all my ties because, as you know, he passed away. And, it was a little bit rude to go and try to take my ties back. That is completely the opposite of Jagmeet, who's, on the cover of GQ walking around with Versace bags, right? Like, Jack Layton was a New Democrat. If Jagmeet is the complete opposite, in my opinion, he's just not, he's not leading the NDP. He's off on a tangent, and sooner we can get rid of him, I think the better it'll be for the party. And there's a great opportunity right now, as you say, where the Liberal Party is collapsing. If they end up with Chrystia Freeland, she's a disaster. if they end up with Mark Carney, I mean, this is like a banker from London. Like, the time for the NDP to shine. They're going to fail in the next election, but there is an opportunity, and I hope we can, move the party in a direction where the opportunity can be taken advantage of, to rebuild and hopefully end up with a system like in the UK, where you have the Labour and the Conservative Party. That's the natural way it should be, and there's no reason why we can't create that future as New Democrats, other than the fact we have just a horrible leader.
Right. Well, pardon my ignorance on this, but what is the mechanism for ousting a party leader in the New Democrats? Do you have to wait until after an election for a leadership review? I mean, you mentioned the Versace bags. True North broke a story last month of Jagmeet Singh jumping into a Maserati on Parliament Hill. We're talking about like $100,000+ vehicle. And he said it wasn't his, but he didn't say whose it was. I mean, it's not like you call Uber and they send a Maserati. Like, it was obviously someone in his family or in his entourage driving around in a vehicle like that. Doesn't really say, hey, I'm out looking out for the best interest of working Canadians. How would your party go about getting rid of this individual as leader?
Yeah, unlike the Liberal Party of Canada, it's not really clear how you oust the leader. In the New Democratic Party, the members can do that at conventions. So you can have a leadership review pretty easily. So the kind of like mechanics to do it are easy. The challenge is, organizing people to go and actually vote. And you need to, it's just not in the DNA of the party to kind of shiv its leaders like the Liberals just did to Justin.
Well, and the Conservatives did to Aaron O'Toole not too long after he lost the 2021 election. So the Conservatives were brave enough to do it, ended up with a better leader. Hopefully, somehow your party will figure out a way to move on in that same way. Well, Julia, it's great to talk to you. Thanks for joining the Candice Malcolm Show. I hope to have you on again soon. And thank you for your efforts for Canadians.
Thank you.
Well, that was a great interview. I appreciate Julia Newman's time. Maybe I'll say, hey, Candice, stop giving advice to the far left party. Like, we don't want them to have a better leader. We want them to go down in flames as well. Look, I want nothing more than for NDP and Jagmeet Singh to go down in flames. They absolutely deserve it for what they put Canadians through. But eventually, people on the left-minded Canadians will want an alternative. I hope many of them will come over to the right. I hope many of them will vote for Pierre Poilievre and help us usher in a better government in Canada. But the ones that are staunch lefties, they deserve better leadership. They deserve someone who will represent their interests, just like I think that Canada would be better off if we had a Liberal Party that was a little bit more right-wing, a little bit better on issues like spending and immigration, because it would force the Conservatives to be even better. I think that the left deserves a party that is connected to the working class, that is connected to the concerns of working class people, and that is not Jagmeet Singh. Jagmeet Singh has been an absolute horrendous leader, and his legacy in Canada will not be a good one. All right, I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow with all the news. Thank you. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. God bless.